Hi, I'm Pato, and it's my birthday, which means I bought an obscene amount of books. I recently asked on Instagram for stuff that y'all consider to be essential, and got a ton of recs. I bought some of the ones that seemed the most interesting, and now I'm going to talk about them, starting with this first pile. Starting off the list is Georges Bataille. Bjork cites him as writing one of her favorite books, Story of the Eye, which influenced her music videos, and her as a person, so excited in that context to get into these. But on its own, Bataille is an absurd sort of black comic writer who explores a lot of taboos, especially in an erotic context, so these are gonna be weird, and I'm excited to see how weird they get. Next, we have Judith Butler's Gender Trouble. This is a sort of feminist text that's more academic, but essentially this is talking about how identity is performative and exploring the ways in which Western culture enforces people into binaries based on how we act. Moving further into literary theory, we have Roland Barts' The Grain of the Voice, an interview collection, with the title one being about how we engage with music through adjectives and how that has slowly limited us in terms of both expression and also what we're getting firsthand out of a performance. As someone who engages with music a lot and tries to talk about it, have a bit of a vetted interest in this. Michel Foucault's book, The History of Sexuality, is exactly what it sounds like. It's broken into multiple parts. The first one is more of a rejection of an existing idea of repressed sexuality historically. I also want to read The Archeology of Knowledge, which he also wrote, but this comes first. Phonography's Grooves and Sonic Afro-Modernity is exploring the relationships between recorded sound in film, in music, in speech, in general black culture, and how it allowed a black culture to exist broadly once it was able to be recorded. Sounds super interesting. My only concern is that it brings up the word modern a lot and came out in 2005, so might not be super up to date, but still sounds very interesting. Discourse on Colonialism is Césaire's Third World Manifesto, as it's called. It is full to the brim of Marxist ideas, surrealism, and critical race theory. I don't know how this wasn't on my radar before, but more than one person suggested this, and as soon as I started learning about it, I was like, oh yeah, I have to read this, so now I will. Dialectic of Enlightenment is really dense, so kind of a late game hopeful for me, but it was written during World War II and explores why not only Germany, but humanity as a whole falls victim to these kind of barbaric ideas, such as the Nazi Party, but in general, how Western ideology is kind of doomed to fail or self-destruct because Enlightenment as a concept is at odds with nature. Like I said, really dense, but I'll get there eventually. And then lastly, we have a recommendation from Noor, Captive Genders, Trans Embodiment, and the Prison Industrial Complex. I did not need to look up anything else. I'm there. I'm sold. Okay, on to the next pile. Out of the first one, I think I'm the most interested in phonographies and captive genders, but this one, we're starting off with Soaring, Fear and Trembling, existential, theological, really dense. I mean, even just this cover is heavy. It was a recommendation from In Person, which is harder to turn down, so here we are. Next up is another one from Alex, Chelsea Girls. Actually, I think I got this one from more than one person, but Alex was like the finishing touch where I was like, okay, yeah, I have to. Don't really know anything about it at all. I'm there though. I know that Bibliosophie also just read this, so I'm in good hands, probably, I hope. Then I have The Straight Mind by Monique Wittig. She's a French feminist, self-proclaimed radical lesbian, and writes a lot about gender politics. I've heard her compared to Butler, so between the two of them, I'm sure I'll like one. This is really short. She seems really interesting, kind of fired up and smart, so I'm sure I'll like it. Then I have Robert Bresson's Notes on the Cinematograph. He's a French filmmaker who's very notable for his minimal approach and kind of sparse filmmaking. He wrote a book about his process himself, and it's an NYRB to boot, so I'm in good hands. Thanks, Aline, for recommending this on Letterboxd. Also, just because I see it in the background, The Destruction of Black Civilization is another nonfiction book I want to get to pretty soon. Critical race theory, it's like kind of on brand for the haul going on, so shout out. Okay, another stack down. I'll go a little bit faster. So Love by Stendhal, as the name suggests, is about love, but more about obsession, unrequited love to be specific, and then becomes very analytical in terms of breaking down different forms that love can take and why it exists in the first place. Then I have Seduced by Story, the Use and Abuse of Narrative. This was a rec from Jalen, who is one of the thinkiest readers I know, but still in a digestible context. So this explores the use of storytelling in daily life and the deception that goes alongside it in everything from politics to literary fiction. Then I have Nietzsche. So Thus Spoke Zarathustra. This is fiction about morality and the meaning of life, general philosophy. I've never read Nietzsche. This seems like the best place to start, so why not? Then Bowhook's Feminism is for Everybody. This is just literal required reading for a lot of humanities classes, and I haven't read it, so yeah. Playing in the Dark, Whiteness and the Literary Imagination by Toni Morrison. Do I even need to say more than that? This is just literary criticism from one of the best people ever, so yeah, it's a no-brainer. How to Write an Autobiographical Novel is an essay collection about politics, identity, writing. It's a newer one. It's been getting a lot of love recently, but more notably, Nathan of Nathan's Nook, Alex of What Page Are You On, and Katie James all really liked this one. 3 of the prettiest and smartest booktubers can't all be wrong, so I'll join the club. A Mind Spread Out on the Ground is an autobiography of an Indigenous writer and their experience with racism and depression and just general life experience. It's supposed to be really moving. Jamie Lee recommended this, and I think that they have really badass taste, so I trust them. Susan Sontag's Against Interpretation is an essay collection on all things art, film, literature, feminism, existentialism, just general late 60s musings on aesthetics. I don't have much else to say other than I need to read this. Then finally is Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde, who is a black, lesbian, radical, feminist, thinker, poet, professor. So many hats that she wears. I had already known about this, but Iggy has been raving about it, and so I picked it up sooner than I planned to originally. Happy to have it. Also, this cover looks so much better than the other one. Hi again. Okay, Pato from a couple days later. The Stragglers finally snail-mailed their way into my hands. Gonna go over them really quick. Happening by Annie Ernaux talks about an event in her life when she was 23, which I just turned. She found out that she was pregnant and abortion was still illegal in France in the 60s, so she writes about trying to do it herself, which seems so awful. But yeah, it's Annie Ernaux. I'm sure that this will break me. Caliban and the Witch is a kind of more modern intersection of feminism and Marxist ideas, looking at the role of the body throughout capitalism's growth and different ways which we can sort of fight against the perpetual cycle of roles of womanhood and reproduction and the link of that to capitalism. It gets kind of heady, but something I want to read. Speaking of modern, Byung-Chul Han's Psychopolitics is super recent, exploring ideas of neoliberalism and big data collection, putting older theories like Foucault's biopower idea into a more modern context in late-stage capitalism. This is a rec from Noor. Not going to claim to super know what I'm getting myself into, but it's really skinny. I think it can do it. Junichiro Tanezaki's In Praise of Shadows is an essay about aesthetics, art, and architecture in not-so-modern Japan. The last book is Horrorphobia, Strippers on Art, Work, and Life, an essay collection by sex workers. One of the writers is Cookie Mueller, who wrote one of my favorite books ever, Walking Through Clear Water in a Pool Painted Black. So for her alone, this is in my cart. But Alex, who I've gotten a bunch of recs from, said that this was their favorite read of the year so far. I haven't even started it, but it might be mine too. So yeah, these are the new additions to my shelf. A lot of nonfiction. That's kind of just what I'm on right now. So yeah, This has been a book haul. I don't really do book hauls because I feel kind of weird about them, but I love books and I also love buying books. So here's some books that I bought. Thanks to you guys for the recommendations in the first place, and thanks for just a really great year. My life has very much revolved around books, so being welcomed into a community, making so many friends, and just having a place to share it all is really, really rewarding. My life looked so different a year ago, and I'm sure it will again by next year. So yeah, here's to another really cool year of reading a lot of books, hopefully starting with some of these. Yeah, thanks again. Bye.